Lord have mercy, Elden Ring releases 21st of January next year, and all things considered, we don't know a lot. I mean, we might think we do, based on the amount of news Roundup articles littering the gaming journalism wastelands of the internet, but when you actually stop and compare three of the most thorough news and info collection articles, as I have done for the purpose of this educational video, you start to see the apparent ocean of info is really like, I don't know, a moderately sized pond, with an equal distribution of dead and living fish contained within. So in this video, as I've just stated, and will do so now again, I've analyzed three of what I deem to be the most comprehensive articles detailing all of the things we currently know about Elden Ring. These articles come from PC Gamer, Game Informer, and Games Radar, and while they all share the same basic info, hell, even similar layouts and structuring, there are some small details that one article will mention that another won't, or in some instances leave me scratching my head thinking to myself, where the shit did that piece of information come from exactly? So without further ado, or YouTube content creator levels of talking about the same tiny thing over and over again to fill out a 10-minute video upload, let's begin, shall we? First up, let's start with the basics. Elden Ring is releasing on the 21st of January 2022 on the PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, Xbox Series S, and PC. Nearly tripped over my own mouth saying those things, saying those Xbox Series. It is confirmed that buying the PS4 version entitles you to a free PS5 upgrade. The soundtrack is being composed by Yuka Kitamura, a longtime composer for From Software, her previous work including the soundtracks for Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. So you know the sounds and screams of agony in Elden Ring are gonna be gorgeous. Around 3 months ago, Elden Ring's publisher, Bandai Namco, uploaded the official gameplay reveal trailer to its YouTube channel, currently sitting at 6 million views, so I'll leave that in the description in case by some miracle of God you haven't either watched it yourself or had a rabid friend of yours forcibly ram it down your throat. Check it out, it's pretty good. Elden Ring's setting is known as the Lands Between, and it was conceived lovingly, I'm sure, by none other than George R.R. Martin, the guy who wrote the books that one show Game of Thrones is based on. In fact, Hidetaka Miyazaki, video game creator and president of From Software, is apparently a huge fan of Mr. Martin's work, and according to the PC Gamer article, has recommended his books to new employees. It seems we have another hot new gaming romance. You hear that, Keighley and Kojima? You've got competition for couple of the decade. Anyway, the extent of Martin's influence in the creation of the Lands Between isn't exactly crystal clear. Miyazaki evidently sat down with Mr. Martin and outlined all the themes and features of this game to be, describing the way he wanted things to play out in terms of not just the story and lore as a whole, but also detailing, according to the PC Gamer article, quote, many game-related aspects, end quote. It's a very short quote. I'm assuming this refers to gameplay mechanics and shit like that, because after all, I'm sure the world's creation and design would ultimately tie into how the game plays on some level, right? I think the best way to summarize George's involvement in this project would be this quote from, once again, you guessed it, PC Gamer's article, with regards to the discussions between Miyazaki and Martin. It goes, quote, this allowed us to have many free and creative conversations regarding the game, in which Mr. Martin later used as a base to write the overarching mythos for the game world itself, end quote. This quote obviously from the mouth of Miyazaki, which sounds like some sort of Japanese comedy drama, so it seems the title of Lore Master Extraordinaire goes to George, while the actual game and its plot and characters lies within the realm of From Software and Miyazaki and friends. Once again, the PC Gamer article supplies us with more info. This is easily the best written article, by the way. If you have to only read one Elden Ring info roundup article this season, this is the one. It says that after the release date was announced earlier this year, Martin explained that he'd actually been working on the creation of Elden Ring's world and lore for years prior. He'd actually completely finished his duties a couple of years ago when the game was still in early development. Now that's a hard worker. Good on you, Georgie. He had this to say on the matter, quote, basically, they wanted a world created to set the game in. They wanted world building as a big factor in fantasy and science fiction, end quote. Science fiction. Now correct me if I'm wrong here, but what the hell has science fiction got to do with anything here? Is that a clue? Is it a hint for an unannounced future title? Is my tinfoil hat on fire right now? Conspiracies and guessing aside, it really does seem like George basically serves as the foundation builder for this game, and then he sat back, he relaxed as the details began to be filled in by From Software. So that's enough about the basics and behind-the-scenes shenanigans. Let's talk about the actual game, shall we? Starting with the world, the lands between is split up into 6 main areas or regions, each containing their own big dungeon and enemies, bosses included, of course. The map itself is open world, although the aforementioned dungeons are not a part of this open world. The Game Informer article delves into these regional dungeons in slightly more detail, clarifying that they are, quote, not present in the open world and are isolated, gated-off instances, end quote. The idea is that while exploring the overworld or map, whatever you want to call it, you'll come across items that you can then take with you inside these dungeons to help you out with the horrors that wait within. These items can be anything from weapons to perhaps magical artifacts or spells. Mini dungeons and field bosses are also confirmed thanks to this very same article. Those are in the overworld, the main map, not the instanced dungeons, of course. Interestingly, From Software have stated that they think stamina will impact the player significantly less this time around. I guess they didn't want to limit you. So when you're taking on these field bosses or dungeon bosses, pick your poison, you'll be less restrained by how many times per second you can roll to safety, or behind the enemy itself for some surprise butt damage. While we're here, we'll get back to the overworld in a sec. Let's talk about the combat briefly. In addition to the standard combat styles, melee magic, all that good shit, horse-mounted combat is now a thing. How it works is unclear currently. Light stealth elements are also confirmed to be in place, so you can hopefully sneak up on an enemy and backstab the ever-loving shit out of him before they even have time to think about searching for the nearby rats that made the noise they just heard. Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh fans the world over rejoice. There is a combat summon system that allows enemies to be called upon for aid in your deepest, darkest moments of fear and frustration. And in case you think that comparison is inaccurate, Miyazaki himself said in an IGN interview that, quote, they're a nice collectible hidden element within the game world to discover and to equip as you go, end quote. Weapon skills can be swapped at your leisure, no longer tied down by any major restrictions. Miyazaki claims there are at least 100 of these weapon skills, if not more. We know there's at least 100. And this heavily reinforces the idea that you truly are free to build your character the way you want to build them. One last tiny combat detail here, you can pull off something called a guard counter, which is a totally different thing from parrying, apparently. It basically is just an attack immediately following the blocking of an incoming attack from an enemy. Alright, back to the overworld. So, with all these regions to explore, you'd surely expect there to be some means of moving around with speed and convenience, right? Well, you've got 2 main options, friends. Option number 1, fast travel. The game's radar article mentions how you are able to fast travel from basically anywhere on the map that is not inside of a dungeon. The catch is you can't choose just anywhere to fast travel to. The only options are, naturally, the various checkpoints you'll come across on your travels throughout this wonderfully miserable landscape. Also, as usual, these checkpoints will respawn all minor enemies that you've killed, as well as restocking your precious healing items once used. These checkpoints are called Sites of Lost Grace, according to the PC Gamer article. Option number 2, your trusty Spirit Steed horse thing. We don't know much about our darling Spirit Steed, but it is allegedly very capable of traversing steep ledges and hills with its jumps. We may also be able to summon it from thin air wherever we damn well please. No word on horse testicle physics like in Red Dead Redemption 2, but if there aren't any, this game just isn't worth the purchase, quite frankly. There is a day and night cycle, and wow, get this, a dedicated jump button. I think I just wet myself out of excitement. Now we can appreciate in full glory the world laid out before us, apparently the biggest world From Software has made so far, and you can't have a day and night cycle without weather as well. Combining these 2 elements with the new stealth mechanics, and you've got a recipe for a whole new approach to gameplay, namely one of your own design. That seems to be a major piece of emphasis here, is that you can play how you want to play. Elden Ring contains a world map, and if I'm understanding this right, the map is entirely hand-drawn and offers you the ability to place your own markers down wherever you desire, marking any points of interest you encounter along the way. As a side note here, a hub area of sorts will become accessible at some point, quote, a little later into the game, end quote. Bloodstains are back, along with the accompanying ritual of pointing and laughing at another player's idiocy that resulted in its creation. And just when you think this game couldn't get any larger in scope and content, along comes co-op to slap you in the face. Up to 4 players can traverse the lands between together. All available evidence seems to point to the co-op system functioning similarly to Dark Souls. You'll summon your entourage and they appear as spooky spirits or phantoms. Invasions seem to function differently, no longer allowing the invasion of a solo player. Instead, only invasions against players in the midst of a co-op session is possible. Keep in mind that this is not 100% set in stone, at least that's what From Software have said anyway. As for the story of Elden Ring, it seems at least slightly more intelligible than usual when it comes to these games. To cut a long story short, of which not a whole lot is currently known, the Elden Ring and the Erd Tree together sort of acted as a source of blessing and grace for the dwellers of the lands between, the Elden Ring being the actual source of the Erd Tree according to the official site. Over time, some of these blessed people lost their blessing or grace and became known as the Tarnished. These people were forcibly exiled from the lands between many years before the current game events. Fast forward a couple of years later, the Elden Ring is destroyed, and Queen Marika's goddamn brat demigod kids decided to steal a piece of the ring for themselves. Now, who's Queen Marika, you ask? Why, she's only the ruler of the lands between, that's all. These pieces of the ring, or shards, that were taken by Marika's kids are known as the Great Runes. The power of these runes drove them all mad, as the story so often goes, and a war known as the Shattering took place. Creative name there. According to a tweet from the official Elden Ring account, it seems that the demigods weren't the only living things affected by the Shattering. Everybody going mad up in this bitch. And you, as a Tarnished, who just can't seem to catch a break, what with you losing your grace and being kicked out of your home, slowly rise to your feet and return to the lands between to claim the Elden Ring for yourself, after retrieving each piece and painstakingly hot gluing the shards back together to become the Elden Lord. Another great name. And by God, I think that's all the big details we can wade through for now, at least until we get to finally see that fabled gameplay footage we've all been clamoring for. If I've left out any details you feel are super important, please yell it into the void in the comments below. Let's all pool our knowledge together so that future generations may look at our efforts and nod slowly with a knowing smile on their faces and say, man, these guys were turbo nerds who gave everything for the love of video games. God bless them. You know, looking back, I guess we do know a lot more than I initially thought we did. I mean, it's still not what I'd call a shitload, but it's better than nothing, eh? Links to the articles and sources are in the description below for your perusal should you crave even more detailed minutiae. And until next video, I'm gonna go stare directly into the sun so that I may absorb as much raw solar energy as possible.